here, laid here in obscurity for the past several decades, and this was a rugged crew that was here, and they were, for the most part, forgotten. They were the ones that were here when this part of our county was developed. And in fact, I found out an interesting fact just not that long ago. This man right here was a scout for Kit Carson, which is pretty exciting. The cemetery was established in 1879, even before Woodland Park was a community, even before the Colorado Midland steamed up the Ute Pass. It's been here for a long time. When the golf course was developed 32 years ago, there were only 2 remaining headstones here. That was Andrew Templeton's and the Workman monument over here, and they were leaning against these 2 posts. They had been removed by the original developer of the golf course and put in a shed over by where the clubhouse is now, and then one of the owners after the development of the cemetery discovered these stones and put them back, but not in their original place. Andrew Templeton's was actually broken in half, so we put it back together. And the only thing that was here at the time was what you see on the outskirts, which was tall grass, a lot of debris, large thistle patches, small pine trees, and a whole lot of golf balls. And so, very critical.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I reckon
Yeah.
over here.
Yeah, in fact, if OSHA had been here, they would have required Steve and I to wear hard hats because they were flying at all times. And a lot of people discovered the cemetery because they were up here looking for golf balls while we were restoring it back. So it was 2 years ago that Steve and I came up here for the first time and decided to go ahead and do what we could to restore it back. And it's a 146-year-old burial ground, and I had no idea what that meant at the time. Steve, through his research, found a 1949 newspaper article by the late historian Harry Johnson, and he had found another 1954 Gazette article which gave us names and some locations of these grave sites. Steve also had 2 1955 photographs that also helped us locate some of these grave sites. We invited the geophysics department of the Colorado School of Mines down, and they came with all of their ground penetrating radar and also helped us establish where some of these grave sites were. And now we have the restored Pioneer Cemetery, and hopefully it'll be around for another couple hundred years. Please turn.
Thanks,
Yay!
Good job.
Well, like Linda said, this is the Templeton Cemetery, and it was established on the homestead farm of Andrew Jackson Templeton and his wife Elizabeth. It was established after the death of their 2 daughters in 1879, which are right back there. And the burials ended, though, with the burial of Ed Moore right here. This was the last burial in this cemetery. He died in 1936. He bought this ranch from the Templetons. After Andrew Templeton died, he bought it from his wife Elizabeth. And the Moores owned this for a long time. Then they would, after he died, then she would lease it out a lot. And in fact, Hildred here, her father bought their ranch, which is adjacent over this way, from the Moores. And Hildred still lives in the very same farmhouse that her parents built way back. Hildred's, just a side note, Hildred's lived here in Woodland Park for 87 plus years.
Wow.
She's, I'm sure, the oldest resident of Woodland Park right now. Hildred, another side note, while she's here and everybody else is here, Hildred has done more for this community of Woodland Park and Teller County than anyone you could think of. For the last 65, 75 years, she's been actively involved in our community, and She doesn't get too recognized for it. She's pretty modest, but I wish the city of Woodland Park and Teller County would recognize her in the coming days. But I digress. So, Mr. Moore here, though, he died, after he died, in 1954, Mrs. Moore was interviewed by the newspaper, and she said all the time they owned this, they took great pains to make sure everything was kept up here, and it was for a long time. And she says no bodies were ever disinterred. And so this is pretty well how it was here. But there's rumors there's up to 50 graves here. But when School of Mines was here with all their equipment, the soil was so wet and damp they couldn't get a lot of good readings like they should. But this is pretty close to it. So, and then back here behind you, I'm gonna skim along pretty fast because some of you guys got to leave. But this is the headstone of David and Anna, their sister and brother right here. This is David Workman, and his sister Anna is on this panel. But the Workman family, if you've been around here long, you've heard of the Workman family. They were in the timber industry, in the sawmill industry. And right here is Martin Workman. This is the nephew of Anna Lacey and David Workman. And right over here is John Lacey, the son of Anna. And as I say, they were all in the timber industry. And Martin's son here, Jake Workman, had a sawmill down here in Woodland. I believe it was right where the dinosaur museum is now. Joe? Yeah. Where the dinosaur museum is now was where his son's sawmill used to be in Woodland. And he used to cut ties and dimensional lumber and all that stuff. And Steve Storrs and I, as a matter of fact, have a loose connection to these two people. This is the grandfather of our friend Thelma Hodgson's, and this is the great-great-grandfather of Lauren Lacey. So, and we went to school with them. Steve actually was in the same graduating class with Thelma and Lauren. So we kind of got a connection with these two people. And David Workman's homestead was just right up here where Clyde Denny's place was, and it was on both sides of the highway. And Anna Lacey's homestead was right over here. The boundary of her homestead was about 600 feet that way, and she had 160 acres over there. So David, he came here in about 1880, and Martin here, he came here in 1882. And this cemetery, established in 1879 with the Templeton children, this cemetery is probably the oldest cemetery in Teller County. And I say probably because I'm not sure what's out at 4 Mile. And Joe, unless you know, is there anybody older than 79?
Not that I know of.
Not that you know of. So this is very well the oldest cemetery in Teller County right here. And it went unknown for so many years. It was lost and forgotten. I know people that I grew up with that are 60 and 70-year residents here that had no idea this cemetery was here, and there's a lot of people like that. So until recently, a lot of the golfers, as Linda noted a minute ago, a lot of the golfers would see us working up here, and nobody, just it was a forgotten cemetery. So now, if there's any questions about these guys, if there isn't, I want to talk real quick about Joseph Holtz here. This is an unusual mystery. And he died in 1904, Joseph Alexander Holtz. And his headstone used to be here. And if any of you knew Annie and Paul Hathaway, they used to lease this here and run their cattle here in the 70s and 80s. And that headstone of Holtz was still here at that time. And they did a wax rub of it. You take wax paper and you put it over the stone and take a lead pencil and go back and forth, and it brings out all the text. And then that rub that they made in 1980 is at the museum in Woodland Park, and it tells how that his stone was here, blah blah blah, and all that. But that very exact same stone is still in existence, but it's up at Mount Pisgah Cemetery today. And that isn't unusual. I've seen that in all the cemeteries we worked in, where people will remove the headstone from one cemetery and put it in another with the rest of their family. If he was here solo, and they'll move it. So if that's the case here with him, I don't know, but he's got the headstone that was here. It's up in Cripple Creek now. So, and he was a miner. He was a superintendent of a mine, and he fell down a mine shaft and was killed.
Oh.
And right over here, then, is the Templeton children. There's 5 of them buried here. And back in those days, this isn't a political statement, but before vaccines, they'd have
Yes.
to pump out about a dozen or 15 kids to get 4 or 5 of them to make it to adulthood. And that was the case with Mrs. Templeton right there. She was a mother to 10 children, and by 1915, I believe it was, she had 3 left. So, but this was their original. This is what started this cemetery, was this group of children right here. And then lastly, the namesake of the cemetery is Andrew Jackson Templeton, and he's got quite a history. Briefly about his wife, Elizabeth. She, like I say, she was the mother of 10 children. She was born in Kentucky in 1835, and she married Andrew on January 14th, 1863, down on the west side, when it was called Colorado City. And as I say, oh, here it is. Here, I wrote it down. By 1900, she gave birth to 10 children, but only 3 were living by 1900. And Andrew here, he was born September 21st, 1830 in Indiana, but he grew up in Illinois. In 1846, while he was only 16 years old, he enlisted in the 3rd Illinois Regiment and fought in the Mexican-American War. And at 18 years of age, he was elevated to a lieutenant, which is quite rare for a person that young. I have a 1949 news article about Templeton. It says he was a scout for Kit Carson. And thanks to Ken, he asked me that question the other day. He said, I bet you knew Kit Carson. Well, I went back and looked through the articles, and yeah, he did. So Templeton here was what they call an agronaut, a Colorado agronaut, which means he was drawn here during the Pikes Peak Gold Rush in 1849, 1850, and 1859. And he was an original Colorado 59er. He was very unsuccessful at mining, but in 1860 he started herding cattle in Park County. And one summer morning he discovered 30. Thank you. One summer morning he discovered 30 of his cows gone. And so he got on his horse and followed them, and he found them right over here at Edlow. And he was able to retrieve all his cattle without firing a shot. Then later, he also began freighting. He was a freighter, and he would freight back and forth from the Missouri River country, bringing supplies to the gold fields of Park County. And while in Park County, he claims to have witnessed a battle between the Arapaho and the Utes with a force of 300 on each side. And he claims that he lent one of his rifles to one of the chiefs, and it was returned to him later, and he got to be good friends with him, blah, blah, blah. On August 31st, 1864, he was mustered in as a second lieutenant of Company G of the 3rd Colorado Cavalry. That company was made up of men from both El Paso and Pueblo counties only. He mustered out a little bit after 4 months later. He mustered out, and then after that stint, he returned to El Paso County and he occupied a ranch down in Colorado Springs And you've all heard of Templeton Gap?
Mm-hmm.
That's him right there. That's where his ranch was. And T-Gap, Templeton Gap, by the way, separates Colorado Springs from Black Forest. That's why it was called Templeton Gap right through there. Well, in 1871, he homesteaded right here in 1871. And he lived on 320 acres here. And even though he had an amazing frontier life, it was during his time as second lieutenant of Company G of the 3rd Colorado Volunteer Cavalry that's controversial in today's society. The 3rd Colorado Cavalry was responsible for the November 29th, 1864 Sand Creek Massacre. And at that annihilation, Second Lieutenant Templeton was one of its leaders and a willing participant. He said, but I have his bio that he wrote. He said you couldn't tell, at a distance, you couldn't tell the difference between a female and a male of the Native Americans down there, and so many were massacred. But anyways, he was an active part of it. But still, it's part of our history, and he shouldn't be forgotten. And that's really about it. Like I say, I'm trying to keep it short. But are there any questions? This is the Templeton Cemetery. This is, to me, it's a big deal.
Yes.
What grades were you able to find here, Steve?
Mines found, I think it was 18 or 20, but the soil was very wet that day, and they said they weren't getting good readings because of the dampness.
They graduated.
Yeah, they graduated.
Undergraduates.
Is this one of the ones you had to repair the stone?
This stone was broken in half, yes, and it was leaning against one of these pit posts right here, and so was this. This is a two-piece marble stone. The top and the bottom marble were separate, laying against another one. And this stone base was the only thing here when we got here, and it was so overgrown with weeds you couldn't even see it. It was a mess here. It was nothing like what it looks like right now. It was quite the deal there. Anybody?
Hey.
I just have one thing to say, real quick. This is phase 1. We are going to go for a phase 2, which this area is eligible for National Historic Designation, and we are going to continue fundraising through grants and private donation for a historical marker and interpretive sign that will describe all of this for the future generations.
That's right, and thanks for bringing that up. We'd like to get a headstone, a regular granite headstone, yay high and like yay, sitting on a base and placed up there someplace with the story of Templeton and the story of the cemetery for all to see. Yes?
Until that happens, who's in charge of making sure that the grass doesn't get overgrown again and that it's...
Well, as of Monday,
Monday we close.
as of Monday, the city of Woodland Park.
City of Woodland Park is, last night the council approved unanimously an ordinance authorizing the city to purchase the entire golf course, which is somewhere in the neighborhood of 360 acres, which this is part of. This is on the golf course property. So the city will own this as a
Joe, you got anything to add? Joe grew up right over here.
You want me to tell them what I told you or no?
Come on, do it. Go ahead.
Nobody's recording.
Well.
Yeah, well,
I'll stop.
A reporter and a recorder.